columnist. You read his column all the time at stltoday.com. And then he, of course, is a KTRS contributor every Tuesday and Thursday here at the Big 550 KTRS. Good morning, Tony Messenger.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Tony.
Lots of things going on in your world. First, what are your thoughts as you see Tim Lomer, the prosecutor in the county, not bring charges in that case that the story you broke a week or so ago?
Well, disappointing, but not unexpected. When I first interviewed Cora Faith Walker, she went into this with her eyes open, knowing that often rape accusation cases are he said, she said,
right.
And she knew that she didn't go, report it immediately. It took a while before she did. That's relatively common in sexual assault cases. And so, the police investigated. The police obviously found enough information to send a report to a prosecutor. And I talked to Tim Lomer, and he thought that there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. And in fact, he went a little further than I expected him to. He said that he thought there was credible evidence that the relationship was consensual. So clearly, Cora Faith Walker is disappointed. I spoke to her briefly.
Does she admit that it was consensual at some point?
No.
Not that matters, but because you can still be in a consensual relationship and have something terrible like this happen. But she hasn't said that.
She says they have never had a sexual relationship other than the instance in which she says she was assaulted. So it is it's an ongoing story in the sense that while there are no charges, both Cora Faith Walker and Steve Roberts Jr. are going to be state lawmakers next year. They're both going to be elected in November. They're both running unopposed.
Right.
And the Speaker of the House still has an issue to deal with in that he's got one incoming representative saying, this man sexually assaulted me, and another one saying, nobody charged me. And it's an interesting dilemma for the Speaker to be in because that is a body that has been criticized for how women have been treated in that Capitol.
Right.
And he's got a responsibility to some degree to try to protect the women in his building. And yet what can he do legally? I don't know.
Right.
But
No.
I think there are going to be some very difficult conversations still between now and January.
It's a mess. All right, so that's the follow-up on the one story. Then the second story you had talking about conflicts of interest. There are conflicts of interest all over the place in this story, but it's a little bit of a convoluted story, but and take us through it. I know it well, too, because we used to work with her here at the Big 550 KTRS, but you call out Jane Dueker for a bit of hypocrisy in your column this week.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Jane and I and you used to have a show here together that
right.
we used to do on your show every week, and I've known Jane for a long time. And what happened is this story, she filed an ethics complaint against 20th Ward Alderman Kara Spencer in the city of St. Louis. And what she alleged in this ethics complaint was that Spencer, who is also the executive director for the Consumers Council of Missouri, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates for consumers, frequently, usually if you've seen them in the news, it's been related to energy issues, fighting Ameren rate increases and that sort of thing. And she alleged that because Kara Spencer had a bill before the City Board of Aldermen that would seek to limit payday loan companies from operating in the city by charging them large permits to have to come in and also increasing the regulation to some degree so that they had to tell consumers a little bit more about how bad their interest rates were. She thought there was a conflict of interest because the Consumers Council of Missouri, also a nonprofit organization, advocates for consumers, is in favor of that issue. And so she files this ethics complaint with the Missouri Ethics Commission. It's been dismissed. When the story first ran in the Post-Dispatch about it, something struck me, and that is that Spencer thought that Dueker was doing this on behalf of the payday loan industry, which made sense.
Right.
It's pretty common for people in politics to file ethics complaints against their opponents, usually on behalf of somebody, either to make them have to spend some money or be busy to defend something or to make them look bad. It's not an uncommon thing. And so that made sense. But Dueker said over and over again, this is completely on my own. I have nothing to do with the payday loan industry. This has nothing to do with any of my clients. And she was insistent, and she went to Twitter, and as she has been lately, was very aggressive on Twitter, saying, I never worked for the payday loan industry. I have not taken a dime from them. And she did it over and over again. And I just thought to myself, Jane doth protest a little bit too much.
Right.
There's something behind this. And so I started looking into it, and went to my friend Google and found out that Jane Dueker, in fact, represented the payday loan industry before the Missouri Supreme Court 4 years ago.
Yes.
And so she has had a client from the payday loan industry. She has been paid by that industry. And what gets even more interesting is that the lobbyist that Spencer thought that Dueker was doing this on behalf of happens to now represent the exact same payday loan company that Jane Dueker won a case before the Missouri Supreme Court on.
Yes.
And what makes it even more interesting is our friends at the Riverfront Times posted following my column is that a couple of months ago, Jane Dueker was involved in a lawsuit against Josh Hawley, who's running for Attorney General on the Republican ticket, in which she brought to issue Hawley's representations of a time in which he took a case before the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court in this case, not the Missouri Supreme Court. And she said, and she was quoted, I believe on another radio station, but again in the Riverfront Times, as saying, I'm a lawyer. I've been on briefs before the Supreme Court. No lawyer ever forgets moments before the Supreme Court. And so I called Jane Dueker and I said, look, Jane, we hadn't talked in a while, but let me ask you about this. You said you had never done this. And she said, yep, that's what I said. I meant it. And I said, what about this case? Oh, my gosh, Tony, you're right. I forgot. And so that was the nature of that column. And I think it's pretty clear from the evidence and the facts and the timeline what happened. And
right, she was a hired gun, and she introduced an ethics complaint that was dismissed. But we'll get to that in a second. In terms of full disclosure and my conflicts of interest, I've had my run-ins with Jane. I don't like Jane anymore. I don't trust her anymore. That's why she's not on the show anymore. So that's where I come from on this. But let's get back to the Josh Hawley thing for a second. She said Josh Hawley had his name put on a Supreme Court brief without his knowledge.
Well, that's what Josh Hawley says.
Well, but the people who put it on there said, we apologize, took his name off and said, your name wasn't supposed to be on this brief.
Right.
In which Jane Dueker then made a big stink during the primaries. Everyone knows when your name appears on a Supreme Court brief. She argued in front of the state's Supreme Court for this payday lender.
Yes, and
on
won.
behalf of this payday lender, and won.
Yeah.
And forgot about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other question is this. It's kind of funny that she was caught in a lie. But isn't there, like, attorney-client privilege? And she forgot she had attorney-client privilege with this attorney. Isn't that some type of ethics violation in and of itself?
You mean in terms of the
payday lender?
The payday lender?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's on a document before the Supreme Court, so she's always going to have privilege with that client.
No, I understand that. But if she forgot. She forgot she represented this company.
Yeah, her client might be interested that she forgot. Right. I mean, theoretically. The client may have a different view of whether or not she forgot than Jane does when she talked to me for the column.
Yeah.
But,
any fallout from the story?
Well, other than the fact that I think people see the ethics complaint for what it was, and the ethics complaint had already been dismissed.
Right.
One of the purposes in writing the column is just pointing out that, this payday loan thing is a big deal in Missouri. Missouri happens to have some of the weakest, if not the weakest, payday loan laws in the country. It's one of those wonderful badges of honor that we have here in this state. And that means that it's really, really easy for those companies to prey on poor people. And Spencer's bill isn't going anywhere. It's just sitting on the Board of Aldermen calendar. I did see the mayor tweet yesterday after my column ran that he'd like to see that bill get a vote, have a hearing before the full board of aldermen.
Well, that's the
and vote on
sad part of it, is that the bill, which might lend some consumer protections to people, languishes while these political operatives play these games.
Yeah, and effectively played the games because the bill hadn't gone anywhere.
Right, and also it sort of gives people an insight into how the game is played a little bit, right? I mean, that is blocking and tackling in sort of the rough and tumble front lines of how it works.
That is part of what happens in daily politics at the city and the state level, and part of it is, if this person appears to be a legitimate opponent, let's go out and take out their knees and see if we can't make them look bad in the public eye.
Yeah, that good point. That's why the column was so good. Tony, great job. Thanks for checking in.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you later.
Post-Dispatch columnist, stltoday.com, all the time online, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays with us, 8:29 here, Big Five.